Lovely. Thank you very much, Sally. I'm aware I've only got 12.5 minutes, so as long as everybody can hear me, I'm going to press on because I've got quite a few finds to get through. This stunning group of Roman bronze finds was reported to the PAS in May 2020, a few days after its discovery. Mark, one of the finders, had regularly recorded with PAS, so he knew to report the find promptly to their FLO, Rebecca, who covers North and East Yorkshire, as Sally has said. Rebecca would be here speaking tonight if she had just not given birth to a baby. So we send our congratulations to Rebecca, and I'm standing in for her. Rebecca was keen to get the find recorded promptly, and the finders were equally keen for it to be handed into the safekeeping of the FLO. However, this was during the early days of the pandemic, and meetings to take in finds were not possible. The finders were confident that all the finds were in the topsoil and that there was no context or further artefacts to be discovered, so an emergency excavation was not required immediately. Accordingly, much of the recording work was done remotely at first. The finders sent images to Rebecca, and within a month, the IDs had been sketched out, with help gratefully received from Sally and John, and later Martin Hennick as well. From the outset, the finders wanted the objects to go to a museum, and the Yorkshire Museum quickly started to look into the possibility of a private sale. But with the Yorkshire Museum still closed and Rebecca shielding, there was no easy way for the finds to be handed in for examination in York. This is where I come in. By October 2020, I was safely able to meet finders, and since the other finder, James, lives in my patch of South and West Yorkshire, we decided that the find should be handed in to me for further assessment. These official photos were done by my volunteers, and I wrote the description part of the PAS database record, along with those details and measurements that could not be deduced from images alone. So with good old-fashioned teamwork between the FLOs and the finds advisors, we were able to create a full record of the finds despite the pandemic. So there are two main theories for why we've got this group of objects together. The first is that it's a collection of scrap metal, but that seems very unlikely given that all the objects are these really high status pieces. So it does look like a structured deposit that's been disturbed, and although we hesitate to use the word, it does look to have ritual significance. This bust is the most eye-catching object. It's a stylized depiction of an Antonine emperor, and it's likely to have been used as a scepter head as part of the imperial cult of the 2nd century. It's probable that its deposition with the other finds came about after its use as a scepter, and you can see the fixing holes around the base of the chest. I'm still puzzled over the piece of sheet that covers the hole in the back of the head, which seems less well made compared to the rest of the bust, and I wonder if it could be a repair. The rivets to attach it project outwards, you can see them on the side of the neck, and so the sheet wraps around the outside of the neck and it just looks clumsy. So I wondered at first whether it was some sort of door that opened, but it doesn't quite work, but it does feel like an afterthought. The obvious parallels to this bust for those of us who work for PAS is the Brackley bust, because it's the image used on the PAS database homepage, and it too is of an Antonine emperor. Adam Parker has written a blog about the Ryedale bronzes, and in it he cites Kiernan in suggesting that perhaps depictions of the emperor had to be deposited carefully as they were such powerful objects. Maybe they required special disposal after the inauguration of a new emperor. This is the plumb bob. The presence of a plumb bob in a ritual deposit is initially harder to explain, but its use in construction may be relevant here. The deposit could be a foundation offering connected to the construction of a significant structure in the area, perhaps even of a shrine. The plumb bob can be compared to an example in the Pitt Rivers collection in the British Museum. And you can see that the British Museum one has still got a pin going through the hole in the top. Plumb bobs are key components of a groma, so the ritual deposition could be associated with the surveying and reorganisation of the landscape. Although Adam Parker points out that a groma had several bobs, and removing just one would make it unusable. So where are the other plumb bobs, or is that perhaps part of the point? Another find that's related to the idea of surveying is the model of a plough team from Piercebridge, which is now in the British Museum collection. This plough team is not typical because it depicts a cow and a bull, and they would not normally be used together as they pull at different rates. However, they would have been yoked together when ploughing a furrow to mark the boundary of a new city, when the good luck brought by the symbolism of using a bull and a cow outweighed the difficulty of controlling a bull who's in close proximity to a female. This is the horse and rider figurine. There are 25 examples of similar figurines known from Britain. In better preserved examples, the rider usually holds a spear and shield, and the figure is often interpreted as Mars, who is also associated with agriculture. This may have seen service in a small portable or domestic shrine before deposition with the assemblage, and it seems to have lost its base. You can see on the back hooves that there are pegs projecting, which probably slotted into a base. A parallel is this one from the database, which again, the horse and the rider are cast at the same time, and those integrally cast examples are less common, and they tend to be modelled in greater detail. For example, you can see the prongs on the back of the cavalry saddle holding the rider in on both of these examples. The Ryedale figurine is also the most northerly known example when you look at the ones in Emma Durham's PhD, and it's right just off the top of the map here, so it's the most northerly by some distance. Then finally, there's the horse head key handle. This object is perhaps most difficult to link to religious activity, and a close parallel for it has not been identified yet either, as far as I know. The pose of the horse is similar to key handles with other proto-animals figuring on the handle, such as those from the French artifacts.mon database. Keys, if it is a key, do have connections to magic in some sources, and there is also the association of ideas with safeguarding or keeping the deposit safe. It's also been suggested that the horse key could be a substitute for animal sacrifice. A good parallel for the assemblage as a whole is the Willingham Fen hoard. It included sceptre heads, including this one in the form of Antoninus Pius, and it had 2 horse and rider figurines, as well as other mounts and fittings in human and animal form. They were likely deposited together in a wooden box. The parallels of the sceptre head and the horse and rider figurines are clear, but I wondered if the box could be significant, perhaps linking to our suggested key. I can't tell you exactly where the find is from. It's known as the Ampleforth area, but this map is centred on the parish of Ampleforth, which is outlined in the middle there. The find spot is therefore within the Holbeck Valley between the North York Moors and the Howardian Hills to the south, and it's about 20 kilometres from both Aldborough and Malton. Parker describes this as a rural setting with no known Roman settlement nearby, and he suggests that the deposit could be to infer a blessing on a rural or agricultural landscape, given the other agricultural connections. There are no other PAS finds recorded from the same field as the hoard, but within a kilometre, we do have all of these, mostly reported by the same finders. So there is evidence of at least 100 years worth of Roman activity in the immediate area, mainly focused on the 2nd to 3rd century. Slightly further away, there are more Roman finds, again reported by the same finders. I think there are enough finds to suggest that the assemblage was not found in isolation, but is perhaps on the edge of a previously unknown Roman site of some kind. The Denari hoard on the last slide could be further evidence that the area had a ritual focus. I've looked on Heritage Gateway and there are no Roman features within a kilometre of the find spot, but in the wider area, there's the Roman pottery kiln at Cockerdale, just on the edge of the moors, the possible villa at Pondhead, Alston, and the villas at Hovingham and Beedlam. A suspected Roman road runs from Malton towards the camp at Wath and Hovingham. The destination of this road is uncertain, but the Roman Road Research Association say that recent work at Hovingham is suggesting that the site may be much more important than just an agricultural estate. So, could the PAS finds and the bronzes discovered in the Holbeck Valley between Hovingham and the Cade Road suggest that this whole area was perhaps more important than previously thought, possibly even a routeway through an agricultural landscape? By the beginning of this year, Any private sale to the museum was looking unlikely, and despite the best endeavours of the museum and the finders, the decision was made to send the items to auction. They attracted a lot of press attention, such as this article in the Gazette and Herald. I don't work for York Museums Trust, so I don't know the details of the delicate discussions that I'm sure were going on, but I do know that the Yorkshire Museum did attempt to purchase the finds both before and during the auction. The hammer price on the 20th of May was £185,000, so well beyond the sort of money which a museum has available for acquisition, though efforts were made. The article is about the finds going on display in York before the sale. In fact, this was for one day when the objects could be viewed only by appointment during a pandemic, so very few people have had the opportunity to appreciate them. I'm one of the very lucky ones in that respect.
Is it in your bag?
Further research will also be difficult with the finds in private ownership, which is why the museum in this statement is being extremely diplomatic in the hope that a loan may be possible in the future. Perhaps further survey at the site might also be a possibility. The assemblage is a key example of why the Treasure Act needs reforming. The finds do not meet the requirements of the Act as it stands. But it's also difficult to formulate a law that would encompass nationally important finds of this type, ones that are not gold or silver, while not overwhelming the system by making huge number of finds treasure that were not before, and without the law being ambiguous or difficult to interpret. It is, however, a testament to the PAS that a record was able to be made of these finds despite the difficult situation. James, who was new to detecting and had not recorded before, is now regularly recording finds with me. The finders followed best practice, they were helpful, they kept apologising about the need for an auction, and they did all they could to ensure that the finds were reported responsibly. From my perspective, it was a privilege, and not to mention a weighty responsibility, to be able to handle these finds and to help PAS make them publicly accessible, at least in digital form. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Amy. That was really good. Thank you. Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself there. So,
Don't worry.
yeah, I